the second half, or welcome to the second half of Inner Urge. So here in this section, the chords are moving one bar each, which obviously makes it trickier. So this is a kind of a nice technique using a Lydian sound and moving in a bass motion kind of sequence. So you hear that later as well in like Weather Report and in jazz fusion. You can hear that kind of thing. So this presents a challenge for us when we're try to improvise over this tune. So I'm gonna try to give you some help on how you can work on this tune. So you need to do all the stuff that we did in the previous videos over this as well. But maybe you should just start with simplifying it, because I think the main trick for a lot of students is that they don't hear the sound. Even if you've practiced your scales, so you know your Lydian scales all over the fretboard, you can't really hear the sound strongly. You need to kind of be able to think of the chords and hear the chords, and also have the technique to know where the scales are, right? So my advice would be to just, well, slow it down and just take the first two chords, for example, E Lydian to D flat Lydian. And just try to get used to that. It's a very unusual chord change. If you only played like jazz standards, they've never this chord change, right? So you need to kind of hear the sounds. So just try to play the scales. E Lydian, D flat Lydian. And arpeggios. Remember I mentioned the major 7 flat 5 arpeggio. Sorry, what am I doing? That was tricky. Sorry, I need to work on that. Give me a second. So you see that already for me it's very tricky, and I already discovered something I need to work on. That change was difficult. I'm not even sure if I'm doing it right. Yeah, so it's an E major 7 flat 5 arpeggio going to D flat major 7 flat 5 arpeggio. Also, I think you noticed that you don't want to be doing this, right? Or at first you need to do that, I guess, but you want to be able to continue to the next note, voice leading, right? So if I play the E Lydian scale for one bar, the next note should be the closest note in the next scale, which would be F, and then I try to continue. Right? Let's say I have, that's good voice leading. An example of bad voice leading would be even though that note is also in that scale, it's not a good voice leading. But it's a more smooth voice leading. Of course you can do this with all the stuff we covered before, pentatonics, hexatonics, chords. Don't forget to try some chords. Again, voice leading. See if you can find a note that works over both the chords, like the D sharp or E flat, right? Works over both chords. It's the major 7 of the E and the 9th over D flat. The Mike Stern theme. Or the B flat or A sharp also works over both, I guess. right? So those are the kind of things that will make you hear the sounds and which notes and how they relate to those different chords. Now let's just extend it with the next two chords. D flat, D to B. So what happens, I think, for me is that I tend to go kind of like this. Which is great, and it also reminds you of the melody. But it's very easy to get trapped in that, and so the only thing you can do every time you arrive at those chords in the tune, it's like, or some kind of variation of that. So you need to break out of that. And again, trying different arpeggios and different shapes and work on that. So I gave you some licks before. For example, this one. Right? You can even work on this like a solo guitar thing, right? So imagine you're doing kind of an introduction to Inner Urge, just by yourself. Don't worry about time. Just think of the Lydian sounds. Yeah, so using that lick would be something like this. Maybe mixing it up with the other previous licks that I showed you in the previous video. So I'll show you some more. What you can do is you can take this voicing. So if we're in F, for example, it's I guess it's a drop 2, drop 4 voicing. Correct me if I'm wrong. So you can play those as a lick to get that kind of wide intervallic sound. And then the inversions. I haven't really covered drop voicings in my lessons, but there's plenty of videos on that. If you don't know what those are, just think of this as a lick. Right? So if I go back to that section we're working on, I'll get E, C or D flat, D, right? And you can play the inversions. And the 9th there, let's see. So an inversion would be this: G sharp, D sharp, B, E. Played as lines. Or the 9 up there. So yeah, I'm using inversions. I'm kind of, some of you maybe don't understand what I'm talking about right now, but that's the major 7 voicing. Then this is a G sharp minor 7, drop 2, drop 4 voicing. If I use those, it's going to sound something like this. There it is. Then you try to mix everything. So that's how I got out of the right? So, by the way, all those licks and tabs and scales and the PDFs are on my Patreon page, and so thank you to my Patreons. I got my first payment from Patreon, by the way, so I'm ordering some new books for upcoming lessons. So keep an eye open for that. So just to summarize, I'm not gonna go over the next chords because I think you can figure it out by yourself. Just work on some of those chords. Don't try to play all of them at once because you need to get them into your ears and under your fingers and so on. And try to come up with licks and intervallic shapes that you like. And slow it down. And work on the B section slowly, chord by chord, rather than try to play the whole thing. That's how I worked on this tune, and hopefully it gave you some ideas on how you can improve your playing over in a So I forgot something, so here's a little bonus thing. To mention, I forgot to mention something. Another way to get out of old habits is to maybe not play this sound. You don't have to play this sharp 11 sound all the time. You can do other major 7 sounds to kind of mix it up. So for example, B over E. It's not a Lydian chord necessarily, but it sounds great in this context, I think. So just the first 4 bars of the B section would be like this. And you can try those triads as well, or play them as licks. Right? Right? And also another slash chord would be F sharp over E to D flat over E flat over D flat. So F sharp over E. It's a Lydian sound. I'm going to slow it down a little bit. Right? Something that can mix in with the stuff we already covered. Another thing is to kind of anticipate the next chord, so you're playing it before it actually happens. It gives you that forward motion, which is a favorite phrase amongst jazz teachers, forward motion. So if you want to be really fancy, you call it forward momentum. Gives you extra credits if you're a jazz teacher. So I'll try to demonstrate it, and I'm anticipating the next chord here. Maybe not the best example, but you can see that it sounds good even though technically those notes are completely wrong, but it kind of gives you a sense of that you're in command of where the changes are going. So that was that. Now I shall see you next time.